Hello, BookTube. We're continuing with my totally useless 2023 library tour. It started out as a visual record of my books, but the more I've done it, the more I've realized that the books are changing all the time. This is the record of anything, so we're just going to continue along. It's fun to go through these books. It's fun to touch with your hands and consider with your brain every individual book that you have. It adds to what the Marie Kondo channels refer to as intentionality. So let's move on to this next shelf. The first one here is this old anthology of Saturday Evening Post sea stories with that lovely evocative cover. You never see anything like this out in the wild unless you have a bookstore like the Brattle Bookshop, and that's where I found this back in 2020. And it's just excerpts and bits and pieces that they've run in the Post. The Saturday Evening Post used to be one of the most read periodicals in the world. It still exists, but no one reads it anymore except old timies. But once upon a time, it was absolutely standard. It was standard reading. It and a handful of other things were what you gathered up at the train station in Chappaqua before you headed to New York City for work for the day. That you just gathered up a bunch of things to read on the way, or to read on the way home in the newsstands in Manhattan. A general all-purpose magazine that was really good. They paid fairly well, so lots of people sent their stuff in. And they did themed anthologies. I've only seen a couple of them. They made a lot more of them, but the Sea Story one had obvious appeal. Okay. Then we have a trade paperback of the Silmarillion, which I changed. The original cover here had a bunch of sleepy elves waking up in the twilight. No sun, no stars, no conflict, no people, no faces visible in close range, no nothing like that. And this book already is drama challenged. It's a pretty uneven thing. So I found just a generic picture of a dragon to at least take the place of Glaurung, or something like that in this book. This is the collected legendarium that undergirds The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So there are discrete narrative blocks in here that tell stories. We've done read-along of the Silmarillion. There are discrete narrative blocks that tell stories. There are others that read more like the genealogical sections of the Pentateuch, and just trudge on and on and on. This group begat that group. This group was waxed wroth with that group, etc., etc. You have to be in the mood for it. I think it's grandly done. There aren't any dull parts for me in the Silmarillion. But if you're looking for a story, it's a little uneven. Okay, then we have A.C. Lyons. This is Invitation to Boston. This is probably 80 years old. 1947, very nearly. This is an old guidebook to Boston that walks you through various places. There's a gate to Harvard University, because all the Boston guidebooks cross the river into Cambridge to take you through the historic homes of Cambridge, and also Harvard University, which is over there across the river. But this is the periodic things like this, older things like this, guidebooks to Boston and the Cape Cod and Nantucket and the Vineyard. I love them. I grab them whenever I see them. They're always going to be of interest to me, even though they are now outdated. This is outdated doubly so, because after this book came out, a massive highway was put through a huge chunk of the middle of Boston, changed the landscape completely, changed a lot of the walking tour books that had existed in their multitudes before then. And that highway stood there, a giant blight on the universe, for a long time, many decades. Whole neighborhoods that are lovingly described in this book were destroyed in order to make that highway go through. And then decades and decades later, city planners looked at that library and the demographics of Boston and the financials from Boston's year-end budgets, and said, well, this thing is preventing the city from growing in the way that it needs to, and that means if it doesn't allow the city to grow, then it's going to act as a tourniquet that's too tight, and the limb is just going to rot. And if you need us to, they would say to the politicians on Beacon Hill, if you need us to, we'll give you stories. We'll show you examples of cities that did not listen and did not plan ahead to prevent that sort of thing. And the Boston politicians said, no, that's okay. You go ahead. And of course, their prescription was that that whole highway had to be pulled down. All those neighborhoods that were ruined, a couple of neighborhoods completely destroyed. Scully Square was completely destroyed for nothing, for a couple of decades of an eyesore. Then that whole elevated highway had to be either pulled down or suppressed below ground in a massive infrastructure project called the Big Dig. And now that's over with. And now, if you go, for instance, this book there's a sort of a tourist trap marketplace called Faneuil Hall here in Boston, Quincy Market and Faneuil Hall. And if you go there for decades in the 20th century, if you went to Faneuil Hall and you walked all the way through the chintzy shops and the overpriced restaurants all the way to the end, you were looking at a big, rusting eyesore of an elevated highway. And now you're not. Now you're looking at trees with a distant view of the harbor. so it changed. It changed all over the place. Changed in my immediate neighborhood. Part of those elevated highways extended even to my immediate neighborhood, and there was an ugly, flaking overpass, and naturally underneath the overpass, right where I walked my girls, were whole encampments of drug addicts and violent criminals and homeless people that just lived there. And not only that, but the traffic was awful, absolutely awful. The flow of it was constricted by the very thing that it meant to expand it. And gradually, that whole area had to be completely transformed. And it is now completely transformed. It's open to the sky. It's full of grass and trees. There are no creepy, dark underpasses anymore. There's nothing like that anymore. And the traffic flows a lot better for it. Just goes to show. Guidebooks. Crime. I don't know. Anyway. All right. This is Emily Neville. This is Emily Neville's YA book. It's Like This, Cat. This is illustrated by Emil Weiss. Just simple illustrations like that. This is, at heart, the story of a boy who finds a cat. And the title would lead you to believe that he spends the whole book confessing his troubles to the cat. But that's not actually true. Instead, the book just sort of migrates to his troubles. I think that the cat, there you have it there. I think that the cat makes an appearance on virtually every version of this book, every cover of it. But it's delightful. Absolutely delightful. Well, it's a YA book, but it wasn't called that when it came out. This came out in 1963, and it wasn't called that. At HarperCollins, it was called Literature for Young People. But the point is that the protagonist is a boy, not a man. He is under the control of his parents, and he is experiencing life for the first time. An eccentric neighbor, first touches of love, first touches of responsibility, or fighting against entrenched establishments. And it's delightful, mainly because the marvelous editor of this book, took a huge gamble on it. It is not sweet. In large part, it is not sweet. The relationship between the main character's parents is not perfect. And there's the shadow, evoked early on in the book and never really dismissed, of mental illness. And the book was popular. First of all, it was popular with the editor who championed it and took it on. But it was also popular with readers because that was their world. That is the world. And that YA books tended to steer clear of that. Oh boy, this shelf is a mixture. All right, well, that's what this room is. This room doesn't have much organization. This next is part of the Best American series. This is the Best American Essays, 2003. The guest editor here is Ann Fadiman, who we've also seen in this little book room. And the Best American Essays is the next oldest iteration. Now you have 20 of these every year. If they start out, it's the Best American Short Stories, and that is still their flagship. Then came Best American Essays, and that has done really, really good work. And you haven't seen any of these because I don't have a whole shelf of them. These have been going on forever. Short story ones have been going on since the 40s, 50s, and the 60s. But I don't have a lot of these. I read them. I very much enjoy them, but I don't tend to keep them. I kept this one because it anthologizes an essay that I read in a Boston periodical first and thought, that is one of the most amazing pieces of short nonfiction I've read in decades. I don't know if at the moment I thought that really ought to be in Best American Essays. It's nice in hindsight to give myself that credit, but I don't know if I ever actually did. But I certainly kept it. I pulled it out of... I'm drawing a blank on what the actual periodical was, but this will tell me. The Boston Review. the old Boston Review. I pulled it out of that issue, trimmed it, dated it, put it in a filing cabinet and whatnot, but and I would periodically go back to it, and then this book came out, and the piece was in there. Now, there's lots of other good stuff in here. I'm not meaning to do that. But the piece that I'm talking about is by Elaine Scarry, who did a couple of full-length books that I really, really enjoy that did make my year-end list. But this essay is called Citizenship in Emergency. And it's about the 9/11 attacks. It's about the 9/11 attacks and the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. And the crux of the essay has been the subject of much debate. I have often found that the people who are going at it, who are attacking it, are doing so in unbelievably bad faith, including some writers who I have never seen exercise bad faith in any other way, just in reaction to this essay. And in it, Scarry points out that, to the best of our knowledge to understand, one of the hijacked flights on 9/11 exercised democracy in emergency. What should we do? Who should we elect to do it? And how should we do it? And are we all agreed? Whereas the government of the United States of America did not do that. It did not do that. It did just the opposite of that. And it's fascinating. Whether you end up agreeing with the essay or not, it's incredibly fascinating. I don't know if Elaine Scarry has like a collected nonfiction, any book like that, where it would also be. As far as I know, this is the only book that it appears in. I've never actually bothered to go and check to see if she actually has a book of collected periodical pieces. That would be great if she did. I would get it. Okay. Then we have the Faber Book of Diaries. We saw this. I got this on this channel just recently. Yes? Did I haul you just recently? Yes, I did. This is edited by Simon Brett, and this is the Faber Book of Diaries. And we've seen at least one other diary anthology here. That's what this is. Just you're going through people's diaries over the decades and the centuries that people have been keeping diaries. This next one is really thin. Oh, great. Yes, this is tiny, but I loved finding this. Absolutely loved it. And I have a couple of books like this, but this one is so handy. This is a handbook to the art and architecture of the Boston Public Library. There is the Boston Public Library, the front entrance to the old building, the McKim, and White building. With the old muses, we have lions at the Boston Public Library, but they are inside. At least I don't have to pass by their glowering gaze every time I walk through the library's front door. Instead, we have muses, and here you can tell a Bostonian will be able to date this thing immediately. You'll at least be able to know when it wasn't made, because at one point in the relatively recent past, I think 20 years ago, the city had some sort of big event coming and decided that the two muses at the front of the library should not be bright green. They shouldn't be lime green covered in mold and rust and whatnot and algae. But instead they should be their original covering. So they had specialists in to blast the ladies clean. They now look like bronze. But they didn't. For the longest time they were lime green at the front of the library. But this takes you through all of there's a John Singer Sargent. There's tons of John Singer Sargent artwork in the library, but also architecture. The two lions that I mentioned that are that in the stairwell that goes up to Bates Hall. Great, that's fantastic. Okay, all right. Well, this is another book of the same kind. This is the it doesn't say so on the title, but this is an art and architecture guide to the Massachusetts State House at the top of Beacon Hill, with the big famous gold plating on the dome there, and there is a statue of Fightin' Joe Hooker from the American Civil War. This is I know this area really, really well. This is the State House that's perched on top of Boston Common, so you can look up and see it. And it's a beautiful sight on a bright sunny day, surrounded by blue skies and green trees of the Common, and it is full of painting and architecture, historic painting and architecture that most Bostonians have never seen nor even thought about. I would be willing to bet that most of the people who take their regular tours that you can take of the State House, they don't cover everything. I know every nook and cranny of the State House, every little piece of it, every attic room, every hidden cloakroom. But there are tours you can take, and I'd be willing to bet that 90% of the people who take those tours are visitors. And they get an eyeful. You might consider it. I know it's the weirdest thing in the world to think of when you're in Boston, of all things, take a tour of the State House. But it's pretty eye-opening. It's really, really worth your time to do. Okay, then this is another book about Boston. This is Mr. Bullfinch's Boston. We've seen a few of these. I have a few guides to Bullfinch was an architect, and a lot of his notable architectural creations. Oh, this has illustrations. Wow, how nice. How nice. A lot of his signature architectural illustrations are here in Boston, which is why I have so many books about them. And what this... Okay, all right, we have a little theme going on here. This is fantastic. Just terrific. This is by Michael Wentworth, and this is called Look Again. And it is a collection of essays about the artwork in the Boston Athenaeum, which is a very old private library here in Boston. It's a subscription library, like a lot of libraries were 150 years ago. You have to pay to be a member or inherit your membership to the Athenaeum. So it's not like the Boston Public Library. The Boston Public Library, you can't make it out from this picture. But right in between those two muses, right up there on the front, on top of the middle door, carved in stone, it says "Free to all." That's not true with the Athenaeum. The Athenaeum is a building at 10.5 Beacon Street. It's a wonderful old library, and it has really, really neat collections in it. But it's not free to all. You have to pay to be a member. And the building is absolutely loaded with artwork. And not just period artwork, but all kinds of paintings and sculpture. There's more paintings. We get a piece of sculpture. The sculpture everywhere. If you sit in the first floor reading room, just to catch up on your periodicals, yeah, it has busts and full-size statues all throughout the building. If you sit in the reading room on the first floor and to catch up on your periodicals, which is a really fun thing to do, they subscribe to everything. You're surrounded by gigantic marble statuary. See, there's full-scale statues everywhere in the building. And those little portraits, these little Boston-style portraits are everywhere in the building, including on the walls in the spiral staircase that you would take if you didn't want to take the elevator to go up and down the different the staircases, where the little windows in the staircase are looking out on shabby alleys and fire escapes and whatnot, but the stairs themselves are marble and they're surrounded by artwork. So it's an amazing place. I don't use my subscription at all now. Because, well, it's the same thing as with the Boston Public Library. I would have to pack a bag and go there in order to do things that I can do here without leaving Frida, without leaving my little bean. In a few years, when she is totally indifferent to whether I leave or stay, because she's going to be sound asleep the whole time anyway, in a few years that will be true. And probably then I will up my usage of the Athenaeum, much as I did when my previous two dogs reached that stage. But she's not there now. Now she notices when I'm not here. She doesn't like it any more than I do. So just like the Boston Public Library or the library out in North Adams near the John Adams home site. It's beautiful. The North Adams Library is beautiful. We take the train out there. It takes you about 45 minutes to get out there. That's a lot of good reading time. And then the place itself is absolutely beautiful. Or a couple of libraries across the river in Cambridge. But what is the point? I suppose the point is to soak in the ambiance and the atmosphere, but I would only be missing things there. I would only be feeling bad about it. And then the worst feeling of all, I've experienced this many, many times. When you're walking out of the Bates Hall, the Boston Public Library, or you're walking out of the Athenaeum, and you're thinking, all right, well, I've wrapped up all I have to do, and now suddenly you're feeling that urgent, nuclear urge to get back home. Is everything all right? Did somebody wake up, with a bad dream or an ache or a pain and look for me and I wasn't there? I really want to get home. You feel that feeling as you're putting your coat back on. Then you step outside and there's sleet and slush everywhere, and maybe it's pouring rain, and you've got a long way to go. I haven't faced that feeling in a long time. So, but maybe I will again. The Athenaeum is a little bit too much of a treasure to let go. Although there were years when I was perfectly free to go to the Athenaeum where I still thought, why am I going here when the Boston Public Library is the heart of my heart, and doesn't cost me anything and isn't a trek up Beacon Hill to get to. Anyway, that was a long psychotic digression, wasn't it? All right, here we have another book. This does not belong here. Quite a few of these things probably technically don't belong here. But this is by James Hart. This is from a long time ago. 1950, 70 years ago. This is his study of the popular book in American history. So he goes through 2 centuries of bestsellers and really popular books, word of mouth, that sort of thing. He takes a handful. You can see some of the books that he's talking about there. He takes a handful of them, examines their publication history and how they became popular, and sort of discusses general themes. And along those lines, I should definitely have this book, but it should be with my books, about book history, book reading, that sort of thing. And it's not. Okay, then we have Tiziano Scarpa. This is his little book, Venice is a Fish, a sensual guide to Venice. That is him. It's a walkthrough of Venice, like a lot of books that we've seen. Didn't we see one yesterday? Yeah, we did. We saw this yesterday. It's a walkthrough of Venice, but here it even says it in the subtitle. It's a sensual guide. It's far more experiential in the moment, which means he's writing about what he was experiencing in the moment, which is very useless for a guide for newcomers, for travelers. You wouldn't want to get this as a guide to Venice if you were going to the city for the first time. But if you wanted to appreciate it, I know Venice really well, and I live there, so I don't need a guidebook, although I have plenty of them, just because they go into lots and lots of detail, and I'm never going to see Venice again. So all the detail is sweet to me. But this is more for if you visited and you really loved it. Okay, and we also have, this is Joseph Brodsky, a great writer who I don't think is remembered for how great he is. I don't think that Brodsky is remembered at all anymore, and that's, I think, a real shame. He loved Venice, absolutely loved it. He fell in love with the place just like I did, and he wrote a little book called Watermark it just goes right along here with Venice is a Fish. Oh, great! Here we have Echo Press did a beautiful, lovely little reprint of Personal Pleasures by Rose Macaulay. I was very happy to get this. It replaced a ratty old trade paperback, and the irony is that these are just light, very enjoyable periodic essays by Rose Macaulay, the author of The Towers of Trebizond, about little things, going for a swim, being afraid of getting a sunburn, opening a book catalog, going to bed, little things like that. But she's the tiny few of you who have ever read her will know she's such a wonderful writer that you want stuff like this. I honestly think that I'm not alone in thinking this is my favorite of her books. And the irony of this beautiful little Echo Press paperback is that just last year, I think, somebody else, I'm not remembering who, came out with an even prettier version of this book, and I don't have it. I never got a copy. I don't think I ever requested it. I'm not even sure who the publisher was, but I was kind of hoping I would get it just unrequested, or that the Boston Globe would, or that the Christian Science Monitor would. I don't know of anybody who got it in the mail, and I never got it. I never requested it, but I would definitely trade up that new copy if I can remember to. I'll try to leave a link. I'll try to find it on Amazon and leave a link to it, and maybe in the process buy it since I obviously want it. I don't usually buy new. Oh, great! Oh, wow, fantastic! All right, this is from the great folks at Europa Editions. They did a crime series, a world noir, where they looked around the world for crime and noir novels that they could translate or bring over into the English-speaking world. And this one I loved. I absolutely loved. When did this originally come over here? This originally came out in 2007. And the translation is by Anne Milano Appel. Wow, I don't remember that. She did the translation for M, Son of the Century, that I loved so much. And well, now I'm wondering if she's a large part of the reason why I love this series so much. This is by Maurizio De Giovanni, and this is I Will Have Vengeance, the first adventure of Commissario Ricciardi, who is in. Let's see, do I have something I can read to you? Well, he's in pre-World War II Naples when the series starts out. So the 1930s, I think, or the early 1940s. And he's a police commissioner, and he solves crimes, and he has a squad and a team who are friends and also loyal subordinates. And one other thing, which you can sort of see on the cover design here, which is that he has a gift, a supernatural gift that he wishes he didn't have. It's plagued him his whole life. He can see dead people, and they repeat to him over and over again the last thing they said. They do not give context, and they do not say it to anyone else. But he can see that, and he can hear that line because they're repeating it over and over and over again. And it has been a help, a marginal help in his career, because it gives him a tiny little leg up. It gives him a little extra puzzle to solve directly from the victim's mouth. So, for instance, he will get to a murder scene, and the dead body will be on the floor, there'll be blood everywhere, the place will look like it was burglarized by just a random criminal, but the dead person will be standing there. The bleeding wounds on the chest. They'll be looking at Ricciardi and they'll be saying over and over again, well, you're the last person I expected, with a big smile on their face. Well, they're not talking to him. They're talking to the last person they talked to. So he knows that the dead person knew the killer. Well, sometimes these things aren't even connected. Most of the time, they aren't even connected to crimes that he's solving. He will walk down the street and he will see a little boy running towards him with his whole chest caved in and blood caking his mouth. And the little boy will be running towards him saying, can I go out and play? Can I go out and play? Because he asked his parents that right before he went out and was hit by a car. No murder, but Ricciardi can't help seeing it. He sees it all. It makes him very melancholy, as you'd expect. And this series went on and on. I think this might be the only one I have. I don't know why I would get rid of the others, but they are wonderful. I don't think they're in print anymore, but they are wonderful. Oh my, so well done. Oh, okay. All right. Well, this next one is really well done too, but in a creepy kind of way. This is Gordon Grice. This is his famous book, The Red Hourglass, Lives of the Predators. So, tarantulas and rattlesnakes and whatnot. But there's a reason why there's a Black Widow spider on the cover here. But the main thing in this book, the thing that if you've read this, it's the only thing you remember from this book, and that is the long chapter on the brown recluse spider and what its venom will do to you. And it's one of the most harrowing stretches of nonfiction I've ever read. This tiny little thing, a spider that's so small you can barely see it. You probably have a brown recluse spider living near where you're sitting right now, but their name is very apt. They're not confrontational. You have to pretty much try to get bitten by one before you will. The thing is, you can try without knowing that you're trying. The last thing on earth that you should do, since it's winter in a lot of the world where you're hearing this video, the last thing in the world that you should do, for all kinds of reasons, but brown recluse spiders definitely, is you've got, let's say, a stove or a fireplace, and it's time to get more wood in from the wood pile out back. Put gloves on to go and handle that wood. Put gloves on, and I don't mean gardening gloves. Put real gloves on to go out and handle that wood. Not just for brown recluse spiders will be in there, and if it's not full-on winter, you could disturb one enough for it to bite you. But also, Black Widow spiders are in there, and rattlesnakes are in there. Just don't do it. Don't stick your hand into wood piles like that unless it's protected. But brown recluse spiders also famously live in pillows in low-rent hotels. So some people will go to sleep in a Motel 6 or whatever on their road trip or whatever, and they'll wake up with 4 bites on their face from brown recluse spiders. And a lot of times, those are just annoying, and then that's it. But every once in a while, the venom of a brown recluse spider is designed to create necropsy. It's designed to destroy an area of tissue and prevent your body from getting at the area in order to fix it so that it rots. And it's exquisitely painful, and it's perfectly captured in this book. Oh my god. Oh my god. What is this next one? Oh. Okay. This is Under the Small Lights, the debut short story collection by the author John Cotter, about many things, but mainly about young love. Then we move on to, all right, well, this is a battered paperback, but it doesn't belong here. I mean, it belongs on the shelf, but obviously there's a space for it that we've just been through. This is Days and Ways in Old Boston, the paperback version of Days and Ways in Old Boston, which is the same thing, takes you through, it's got pictures of people and also, I think, pictures of buildings. Yeah, old engravings of buildings as well, of historic locations, and it's basically the history of Boston up until the turn of the 19th century. Like I said, I love things like that, so I get them whenever I see them. Now, very good. All right, this is Madeline Blaze. This is her book, To the New Owners, which is a Martha's Vineyard memoir, in the form of an extended series of letters that the author is leaving to the new owners of the vineyard house they are selling, which is silted all the way down to the floor joists with family memories, and therefore works as a kind of glimpse of the history and nature and the color and the seasons of the vineyard, of Martha's Vineyard. I read this and was absolutely charmed by it, just completely charmed by it. Not only the optimism and the happiness, but also the wistfulness, which is necessary when you're writing about the Cape or the vineyard. And I was very happy to review it. I'm blurbed on the paperback, but not for the Martha's Vineyard Gazette. If I hadn't been reviewing for them. If I had been, I would certainly have done this for them. Instead, I got permission to review this for the Christian Science Monitor, so I'm blurbed on the back. And was very happy to be, because it's just a winner of a book. And then we finish up here. This has gone long. We finish up with another of the Oxford books. We've seen a lot of these before, the Oxford Book of the Sea or Adventure Stories or whatever. And this is the Oxford Book of Essays, edited by John Gross, and is really good as an essay collection. I have about 5 essay collections in this room, I think, maybe 1 or 2 more than that, and this is just fantastic. Very meat and potatoes, not trying to break new ground at all, but really, really good for that. Just a really well done, careful essay collection. So there you go. That was this shelf. We're getting closer and closer to me not being able to use this chair, but I think the next shelf I can. I'm pretty sure. See, let's do a test here. Yeah, I don't need to bend out of the camera range, so I'll be on the chair for the next one, thankfully. Oh, so I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.